The rain came down hard that evening, the kind that soaked through bone and memory alike, turning the dirt road into a ribbon of mud and sorrow. The sky over the plains was low and iron-colored, pressing down on the land as if the world itself was tired. The cowboy rode slow, hat pulled low, coat heavy on his shoulders, his horse's hooves sinking into the wet earth with dull, tired thuds. He had planned to be home before dark, planned to sit by his fire, with a warm meal and silence, but plans didn't mean much out here. Not when the land had its own rules, not when fate decided to step into your path uninvited. That was when he saw them. At first, he thought they were fence posts or shadows bent wrong by the storm. 3 small shapes huddled near the road, barely moving, rain plastering their clothes to their thin bodies. He slowed the horse, eyes narrowing, heart tightening in a way he didn't expect. As he drew closer, the shapes shifted. Children, 2 girls and a boy, no older than 8, 7, maybe 5. Their hair was soaked flat against their heads, shoes worn through, feet sinking into the mud. The smallest one clutched the sleeve of the older girl like it was the only thing keeping him upright. They weren't crying. That struck him hardest. Kids cried in storms. Kids screamed, panicked, begged. These 3 just stood there, shivering so hard their teeth rattled, eyes hollow with a kind of exhaustion no child should ever know. The cowboy swung down from his horse, boots splashing in the mud, and raised a hand slowly so he wouldn't scare them. His voice, when he spoke, came out softer than he meant it to. "Hey there, what are you doing out here?" No answer, just wide eyes staring up at him, filled with fear and something deeper, resignation. Like they'd already learned the world didn't owe them kindness. He crouched to their level, rain soaking into his knees. "Where's your folks?" he asked gently. The oldest girl swallowed hard. Her lips trembled before she spoke, voice barely louder than the rain. "Mama's behind us." Something in the way she said it, past tense without realizing. It made his chest tighten. "Behind you?" he repeated, glancing down the road they'd come from. The muddy stretch disappeared into gray mist and falling rain. "How far?" The girl shook her head. She was walking. Then she fell. The boy clutched her tighter, burying his face against her arm. The smallest girl stared at the road like she expected it to swallow her whole. The cowboy stood slowly and followed the children's gaze. That's when he saw her. She lay sprawled in the mud some distance back, rain pounding her thin body into the earth. One arm bent at an unnatural angle, dress torn and soaked through. She wasn't moving, not even a flinch, just lying there like the land had finally claimed her. The cowboy didn't remember mounting his horse again, didn't remember the rush of cold rain on his face as he rode back toward her. All he knew was the pounding in his ears, louder than thunder. He slid off the horse beside her, dropped to his knees and reached for her shoulder. She was breathing, but shallow, too shallow. Her face was pale, lips blue, eyes half-lidded. Viva burned beneath her skin, even as the rain chilled her to the bone. She murmured something. Names, maybe prayers, words tangled and broken. "She tried," the cowboy muttered under his breath. "Lord, she tried." He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, then lifted her carefully, feeling how light she was. Too light for a grown woman. Hunger had carved her down to almost nothing. When he turned back toward the children, they hadn't moved. Still standing where he'd left them, rain soaking them through, hope flickering weakly in their eyes. "She gonna wake up?" the oldest girl asked. The cowboy swallowed. "She will," he said, because sometimes truth had to wait. "But not out here." He mounted the horse carefully, positioning the woman in front of him, then reached down. "Come on, all of you. We're getting out of this storm." The kids hesitated only a second before, obeying. Tiny hands gripping the saddle and his coat as if letting go meant disappearing forever. As they rode away from that stretch of road, the rain kept falling, but something else had begun to move too. Hope, even if it was fragile, even if it didn't know yet how hard the night ahead would be. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than any trail the cowboy had ever ridden, though it was only a few miles at most. The rain followed them relentlessly, soaking into his shirt, dripping from the brim of his hat, seeping through the children's thin clothes until their shivering turned violent. He kept one arm locked around the woman in front of him, feeling each fragile rise and fall of her chest. Counting breaths like a prayer he was afraid to finish. The horse moved steadily despite the mud, as if it too understood that stopping was not an option. The oldest girl stumbled more than once, her legs trembling from exhaustion, but she never complained. Each time she faltered, the cowboy slowed the horse, reaching back to steady her with a rough, gentle hand. The boy tried to be brave, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the ground. But every now and then, a quiet sob slipped out, swallowed quickly by the rain. The youngest lagged behind, too tired to keep up, until the cowboy finally leaned down, lifted her with one arm, and settled her against the saddle behind him. She clung to him instantly, small fingers gripping his coat like it was the only solid thing left in the world. When the ranch house finally came into view, a dim shape, against the storm, the children stopped walking. They just stared. To them it looked like something unreal. A warm light glowing in the window, smoke rising faintly from the chimney like a promise they didn't quite trust yet. "Almost there," the cowboy said softly, though his voice cracked with something dangerously close to relief. Inside the house was cold but dry, the kind of place that had learned to endure loneliness. He kicked the door open and carried the woman straight to the small bed near. The fire laying her down with care. Her skin burned beneath his touch now, fever raging beneath the chill, and she let out a low, broken sound as he eased her arm straight. The children hovered near the doorway, dripping rainwater onto the wooden floor, unsure if they were allowed to step further. The cowboy turned, took one look at their faces, and felt something twist painfully in his chest. "And you're safe here," he said firmly. "Ain't nobody turning you away." He set to work quickly, stoking the fire, hanging wet clothes near the hearth, wrapping the kids in old blankets that smelled of smoke and cedar. He poured water, warmed it, coaxed small sips into the woman's mouth. She stirred, eyelids fluttering, lips moving soundlessly. The oldest girl rushed to her side. "Mama," she whispered, voice trembling. "Mama, we're inside." The woman's eyes opened just enough to see her children, and a tear slipped free, lost in the dampness on her cheek. She tried to lift her hand, and couldn't. Panic flared in her eyes, until the cowboy gently pressed her hand back down. "Easy," he said. "You're safe. I got you." Her gaze shifted to him then, suspicion first, then confusion, then a quiet fear. "My children," she rasped. "Right here," he answered. "All of them." That seemed to be enough. Her eyes closed again, breath shallow but steadier. Hours passed like that. The storm raged outside, but inside the ranch house time slowed. The kids sat close to the fire, steam rising from their clothes, their shivering gradually easing. The cowboy gave them bread and a bit of stew, nothing fancy but hot. They ate slowly, carefully, like they were afraid the food might disappear if they moved too fast. The oldest girl finally spoke again. "Sir, we won't stay long." The cowboy paused, studying her face. Too serious, too careful. Like someone who had learned early not to ask for much. "Ain't nobody rushing you," he said. "Storm's bad. Roads ain't safe." She nodded, but her eyes flicked to her mother on the bed. "Mama said we gotta keep moving. Folks don't want mouths to feed." The words landed heavy in the room. The cowboy looked away, jaw tightening. He'd lived alone a long time, chosen it, thought it was easier that way. But seeing these kids, seeing how small they were, how tired, made that choice feel suddenly hollow. Later that night, as the fire burned low and the children finally slept curled together on the floor, the woman woke again. This time her eyes stayed open. She looked around slowly, taking in the room, the warmth, the absence of rain. "You saved us," she whispered. He shook his head. "Just gave you a roof." Her voice broke. "I couldn't go any further." He sat on the edge of the chair, elbows on his knees. "What happened out there?" She hesitated, then spoke like confessing a sin. "Their father died last winter. Work dried up. I tried to walk to the next town. Thought I could make it." Silence filled the space between them. "I failed," she said quietly. "If you hadn't come—" "You didn't fail," he interrupted, voice firm. "You got them this far." She looked at him then, really looked, and something in her expression softened. Gratitude, yes, but also shame, fear, and a mother's relentless guilt. Outside, the rain finally began to slow. Inside, the cowboy sat awake long after the fire burned to embers, listening to the uneven breathing of a woman who had given everything she had left, and the soft sleep sounds of children who had almost been taken by the road. He didn't know it yet, but the life he'd built around solitude had already begun to crack. And once it cracked, there was no going back. Morning came slow and grey, like the world itself was reluctant to wake after the violence of the storm. The rain had softened into a mist, clinging to the land and wrapping the ranch in silence. The cowboy had not slept. He sat at the small table with a cup of black coffee gone cold in his hands, eyes fixed on the window as dawn crept in, listening for every breath from the bed behind him, every shallow inhale from the woman, every faint stir from the children on the floor, kept him anchored in a vigilance he hadn't felt in years. When the woman finally woke, it wasn't with panic, but with the quiet confusion of someone who expected pain and found warmth instead. She tried to sit up, wincing as her body protested. The cowboy was at her side instantly, steadying her shoulders. "Easy now," he said. "You took a bad fall." She swallowed, eyes flicking around the room. "My kids still sleeping," he answered. "They're safe." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She turned her face away, ashamed of the weakness, but he didn't look away. He'd seen worse on the range, men broken by loss, animals by hunger, but a mother crying in silence cut deeper. Her name, she told him later, was Clara. The children were Ellie, Thomas, and little Rose. Saying their names seemed to steady her, like naming them made them real again. Still hers. He fixed her arm as best he could, binding it tight, then heated water for her to wash. As she moved about the room slowly, stiff and pale, he noticed how careful she was not to wake the children, how every step was measured by their needs instead of her pain. When the kids finally stirred, they froze at the sight of their mother sitting upright. Ellie was the first to rush forward, throwing her arms around Clara's waist, careful but desperate. Thomas followed, trying to act brave, but his chin trembled. Rose just pressed her small body against her mother's leg, like a cat afraid of being lost again. "I'm all right," Clara whispered, though it was only half true. "We're all right." The cowboy stood back, watching, something heavy settling in his chest. He'd helped strangers before, lent water, directions, even money, but this felt different. This felt permanent in a way he hadn't invited. Later, while the children ate breakfast, Clara spoke quietly with him near the door. "We should go," she said. "Soon as I can walk." The cowboy shook his head. "You ain't in shape to go anywhere." She lifted her chin. "We can't stay. Folks don't take kindly to burdens." He studied her, thin, proud, worn down by grief but not broken. "You ain't a burden," he said simply. She gave a sad smile. "Everyone says that. At first." That afternoon, trouble came riding in on the wind. The cowboy heard it before he saw it, voices rough and impatient. Two men approached from the road, coats dark with damp, eyes sharp and hungry in the way men get when they smell opportunity. One carried a ledger, the other a rifle slung careless over his shoulder. The cowboy stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Afternoon," the taller man said. "You seen a woman and 3 kids pass through here last night?" The cowboy's hand rested near his belt. "Plenty of folks pass through," he said evenly. "Why?" "They owe money," the man replied. "Walking debt don't disappear just 'cause it rains." Inside, Ellie stood frozen by the window, listening. Clara's face drained of color. She knew those voices. The cowboy straightened, eyes hardening. "Ain't nobody here but me." The men exchanged looks. The one with the rifle smirked. "Might want to check again." That was when the cowboy knew this wasn't just about kindness anymore. This was about choice, about whether he would keep riding alone, letting the world take what it wanted, or finally draw a line in the mud and say no further. He stepped forward, boots firm on the ground. "You heard me. Ride on." A tense silence stretched. Rain dripped from eaves. Somewhere inside, a child whimpered. Finally, the men turned away, muttering threats that hung heavy in the air. When the cowboy went back inside, Clara was shaking, not from cold this time. "They'll come back," she whispered.
They always do.
He met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "Then they'll find me waiting." As night fell again, the ranch no longer felt like just a shelter. It felt like a battleground. And for the first time in a long time, the cowboy wasn't afraid of the fight. The second night settled over the ranch like a held breath. The wind had died, the rain finally gone, but the silence it left behind felt heavier than the storm itself. The cowboy sat near the window with his rifle across his knees, eyes fixed on the dark stretch of road that disappeared into the hills. Every sound, wood popping in the fire, a distant coyote, the soft breathing of children, set his nerves taut. He wasn't waiting out of fear. He was waiting because some promises once made didn't allow sleep. Behind him, Clara lay awake on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Pain pulsed through her arm, but it was nothing compared to the ache in her chest. She had lived long enough on the edge of loss to recognize safety when it came, and to know how fragile it was. She watched the cowboy's silhouette in the low light, the way he sat so still, like a man carved from the land itself. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. He didn't turn. "Already am." She swallowed. "Those men, they're not just collectors. They work for people who don't forget." "Neither do I," he replied. The children slept fitfully. Thomas jerked in his sleep, muttering half-formed words about the rain. Ellie lay curled protectively around Rose, one arm draped over her sister like a shield. The cowboy glanced at them and felt something tighten in his chest. Again, something dangerously close to purpose. Just before dawn, hoofbeats echoed faintly in the distance. He rose slowly, easing the door open and stepping outside. The cold air hit his face sharp and clear. Two riders emerged from the mist, same men as before, this time joined by a third, older, heavier, eyes cold and calculating. The one with the ledger dismounted, boots crunching on gravel. "You had your chance," the man said. "Hand them over." The cowboy stepped forward, rifle resting easy but ready. "There ain't nothing you're taking from here." The older man studied him for a long moment, then smiled thinly. "You don't even know what you're protecting." Inside, Clara heard the voices and forced herself upright, ignoring the pain. She moved to the window just enough to see the standoff. Her heart hammered. She had dragged danger here. No matter how kind this man was, she could not let him pay for her past. She opened the door. "Stop!" she called out, stepping onto the porch. The cowboy turned sharply. "Get back inside." The older man's eyes lit up. "There she is." Clara lifted her chin, shaking but resolute. "The debt is mine. Leave the children." The man laughed. "That's not how it works." Before anyone could move, the cowboy stepped between them. "It works how I say it does." Tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Hands hovered near guns. The land itself seemed to hold still. Then the older man spoke again, voice low. "You think you're a hero? This ends with blood." The cowboy didn't flinch. "Then it ends here." For a long moment no one moved. Finally the older man spat into the dirt. "This ain't over," he said, mounting his horse. "We'll be back with papers." As they rode off, Clara collapsed against the porch rail, breath coming in shallow gasps. The cowboy caught her before she fell, steadying her with one arm. "You shouldn't have come out," he said. "I won't let my children grow up watching people bleed for them," she whispered. He looked down at her, rainstorm eyes softened by something gentler. "Then we better make sure they grow up at all." As the sun rose over the plains, painting the land gold, the cowboy made a decision he'd been avoiding since the storm. He would not just protect them for a night. He would see this through, whatever it cost. Because some families weren't born. They were chosen. The day after the riders left felt unnaturally calm, like the stillness that follows a gunshot echoing across open land. The cowboy worked the ranch as he always had, mending a loose fence post, checking the horses, hauling water, but nothing was routine anymore. Every task was done with one ear tuned to the road, every glance stretched toward the horizon. Danger didn't announce itself twice. It simply returned when you stopped listening. Inside the house, Clara forced herself into motion despite the pain that lanced through her arm with every step. She swept the floor, folded blankets, tried to be useful in a space that was not hers. Each movement was a silent apology. She watched the children carefully, memorizing their faces as if afraid the world might take them when she wasn't looking. Ellie helped without being asked, moving with a seriousness that belonged to someone far older than her years. Thomas hovered near the door, peering out whenever the cowboy passed. Idol and protector rolled into one. Rose stayed close to Clara's side, tiny hand never letting go. By midday, the truth Clara had been carrying like a stone finally broke free. "They didn't just want money," she said quietly while the cowboy sharpened a blade near the fire. "My husband signed something before he died. A labor contract. When he couldn't work anymore. They came for us instead." The cowboy's hand stilled. "They traffic in families now?" "They call it repayment," Clara whispered. "Children grow up owing. Mothers work until they can't." Silence pressed heavy between them. "We can leave," she said quickly. "I won't stay and bring this down on you." He met her gaze, eyes steady. "They already know where you are." That night, the riders returned, this time with paper and authority stamped in ink and cruelty. The older man dismounted first, unrolling a document with practiced ease. "By law," he said, "those children are bound." The cowboy didn't take the paper. He didn't need to. He could read men better than words. "You step 1 foot closer," he said, "and there won't be a law left to hide behind." The standoff exploded faster than anyone expected. A gunshot cracked the air, not from the cowboy's rifle, but from the younger man's nervous hand. The bullet tore through the dirt near the porch. Thomas screamed. Everything after moved like instinct. The cowboy fired once, clean warning, close enough to end the argument. Horses reared. Men cursed. In the chaos, Clara lunged forward, shielding her children as the older man grabbed her arm. "Enough!" she cried. "Take me. Let them go." The cowboy moved faster than thought, wrenching her free. Rifle raised, voice thunderous. "You touch her again and you don't leave this land." Something in his eyes convinced them. They retreated, but not before the older man delivered his final promise. "You can't protect them forever." When silence returned, it was broken only by Clara's sobs. She collapsed to her knees, the weight of years crashing down at once. Ellie wrapped her arms around her mother. Thomas stood rigid, fists clenched, staring at the road with a new, dangerous understanding. Rose cried softly, confusion and fear tangled together. The cowboy knelt in front of them. "Listen to me," he said, voice loud but unshakable. "This ain't your fight anymore." Clara looked up, eyes red and hollow. "Then whose is it?" "Mine," he answered. That night, under a sky finally clear, the cowboy did something he hadn't done in decades. He prayed not for safety, but for strength, because the road ahead would demand everything he had left, and he was ready to give it.